Sell your vehicle. Cameron's loan won't settle itself. My dad lost it after raising my rent in a house I secretly owned. I replied, then start packing. You have 30 days to move out. I delivered the eviction notice in front of 40 guests at a backyard get-together.
Hey, Reddit.
The first time my dad increased my rent, he didn't ask me. He didn't sit me down to talk. He didn't even seem uncomfortable. He just told me. We were in the kitchen late one night, the very kitchen I'd lived in for nearly 3 years, the same one I repainted because I hated the dull beige he picked. The light above the sink buzzed softly. A half-empty mug was between us, its steam long gone. Rent's going up, he said, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. You can handle it. I chuckled, not because it was funny, but because I thought he was joking. He didn't smile back. That was the first sign. This house was never meant to be permanent. When my job moved me closer to the city, my parents offered this place as a temporary fix. Quiet neighborhood, large backyard, plenty of room. They framed it as a favor. What they didn't know, and what I had never told them, was that I already owned the house. Not directly, but through a small LLC I had set up years ago. Back when I started quietly building assets without involving my family. At that time, it seemed easier to let them think the house belonged to one of my investment entities rather than deal with questions or assumptions. Initially, the arrangement was simple. I paid rent. I covered utilities. I took care of repairs myself. No drama, no tension. Then Cameron needed money. He always needed money. He was my younger cousin, charming, impulsive, and constantly on the verge of success. New business ideas every year. New cars he couldn't afford. Loans he claimed would be temporary. My dad adored him. He's got potential, Dad always said. He just needs support. Family helps family. That phrase followed me everywhere. One night, Dad slammed his phone on the table. Cameron's loan is overdue, he snapped. They're threatening to take his car. I nodded, sympathetic but detached. I'd learned not to react emotionally when money was involved.
Then he looked at me.
So we're raising the rent, he said. Raising? I asked. Doubling, he replied flatly. The word didn't register right away. That's not fair, I said carefully. I've never missed a payment. I take care of the house. Dad scoffed. You live alone. You don't have kids. You don't need savings. That sentence stuck with me long after he said it. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I paid because I still believed this was temporary. I believed logic mattered. I believed my cooperation would eventually be met with fairness. It wasn't. 6 months later, the rent increased again. Not doubled this time. Adjusted, as Dad liked to say. He always used calm words when he was asserting control. It made everything sound reasonable. Another time, another reason. Cameron's car needed fixes. Cameron was behind again. Cameron was stressed. Each time, the expectation was the same. I accepted it. I started noticing patterns. The rent only increased when Cameron needed help. The tone only hardened when I hesitated. The guilt only appeared when I questioned it. One evening, after I pushed back more than usual, Dad snapped. Sell your car, he said sharply. Cameron's loan isn't going to pay itself. Something shifted in me at that moment. Not anger, but awareness. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a demand. And it wasn't about money. It was about control. I went quiet then, the way people do when they're done justifying themselves. I began documenting everything. Rent hikes, texts, dates, amounts. Not because I planned to confront him, but because a voice inside me kept saying, this will matter. The backyard party was unexpected. Dad decided to host it for no reason. Music, drinks, barbecue, laughter. He invited everyone, friends, extended family, neighbors. About 40 people crowded into the yard. I stood near the patio, holding a drink I wasn't actually sipping, watching my dad enjoy being the host. He loved the attention, being seen as generous, successful, in control. That's when he did it in front of everyone. He announced loudly, raising his glass like it was a toast. Gotta help Cameron out. A few people laughed awkwardly. Some glanced at me, waiting for my reaction. I felt certainty settle in. I set my cup down. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I walked inside. The house felt quieter compared to the noise outside. Familiar, steady mine. In the study, I opened the locked drawer I hadn't touched for years. Inside was the deed. My name, only my name. I took a breath, then walked back outside. 40 people turned to me. My dad smiled confidently. Dad, I said clearly, my voice calm. Since you're so comfortable making financial choices for this house, I held up the papers. I think it's time you knew something. What happened next? With 40 guests watching, eviction papers ready, and ownership finally revealed, every illusion of control my father believed he had vanished. The silence after I spoke wasn't immediate. At first, people laughed, an awkward kind of laughter that people use when they think a moment is supposed to be funny, but can't quite tell why it isn't. A few guests exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else took a sip of their drink too quickly. My father still smiled, but that smile lingered longer than it should have, frozen as if his body hadn't caught up with his mind trying to process what is happening. The deed, he repeated. You're joking. I didn't respond right away. I stepped closer and laid the papers flat on the patio table, smoothing them with my palm. The gesture was small, calm, almost gentle, but it carried more weight than any raised voice could have. Read it, I said. He didn't. At least, not at first. He stared at the page as if it might change if he waited long enough. Around us, the party had come to a halt. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. 40 people stood there, pretending not to listen while they listened to everything. One of my father's friends leaned in, squinting. Is that? Yes, I said. It's real. My father's jaw clenched. This isn't how family handles things. I looked at him steadily. You double my rent to cover someone else's debt. In public, that was a discussion, he snapped. No, I replied. That was a declaration. His voice dropped. You're embarrassing me. I nodded slowly. You did that yourself. You just didn't expect consequences. That was when his smile finally vanished. I pulled out the eviction notice next. The paper made a soft sound as I unfolded it, louder in that quiet yard than it should have been. 30 days, I said, projecting my voice just enough for those closest to hear. That's the legal notice. Everything's documented. Someone gasped. Another guest stepped back instinctively, as if physical distance could protect them from being part of this. You wouldn't, my father said, his voice cracking for the first time. I already did, I replied. Cameron still wasn't there. He never was when accountability showed up. The party ended without anyone announcing it. People began leaving quietly, one by one, then in groups. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered apologies they didn't fully understand. A few paused to hug me awkwardly, unsure of what side they were on but sensing something irreversible had happened. By the time the yard emptied, it was just my father and me. The music still played absurdly cheerful. He turned it off abruptly. You planned this, he said. I shook my head. No, you did years ago. He paced the patio, running his hands through his hair. All this time, he muttered. You let me think. I let you treat me like a wallet. I interrupted. That part's on me. He stopped pacing. You could have told me. You never asked, I replied. You just charged. Silence stretched between us. You'll regret this, he finally said. I looked at the house, my house, glowing softly behind him. I regret not doing it sooner, I said. I went inside and locked the door. The days that followed were relentless. My phone filled with messages, anger, disbelief, guilt, bargaining. My father accused me of betrayal. My aunt accused me of cruelty. My cousin accused me of ruining the family. No one accused me of lying. That mattered. The eviction process moved forward exactly as the law required. There were no loopholes, no dramatic courtroom moments, just paperwork, deadlines, and reality. My father hesitated. I didn't. On the final day, I stood across the street, watching him load the last of his things into a truck. He didn't look at me. He didn't say goodbye. He drove away. The house felt different immediately, lighter, quieter, honest. In the months that followed, the fallout spread through the family. Some people stopped calling. Others reached out cautiously, embarrassed. I didn't know, one cousin admitted. You always seemed fine. Another said I was fine. I just wasn't visible. I renovated the house properly. Not to erase him, but to reclaim it. New paint, new fixtures, new energy. I eventually rented it out to tenants who paid rent without entitlement, without emotional manipulation, and without treating my boundaries as suggestions. A year later, my father called. Just once. I didn't think you'd go through with it, he said quietly. That was the problem, I replied.
He didn't argue.
Neither did I. We ended the call politely, distantly. People who control you financially will always call it love. Those who benefit from your silence will call boundaries betrayal. And those who rely on your compliance will panic when you stop. I didn't evict my father to hurt him. I did it to stop hurting myself. Because the moment he told me to sell my car for someone else's debt, he made it clear I was never a daughter, only a resource. So, I stopped being one. If someone treats your money as theirs and your boundaries as inconveniences, they don't want family, they want control. Ownership is more than property. It's the right to say no without feeling sorry. Sometimes, the hardest decision is the most powerful one. That's all for today's story.
Stay tuned for more like this.
Thanks for watching.